At 10 a.m. this morning, the United States Navy began blockading every Iranian port on Earth. Not a drill, not a threat, not a diplomatic gesture. As of 5:30 p.m., Iran time on April 13, 2026. CENTCOM is interdicting every vessel entering or departing Iranian ports and coastal areas. Ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz to non-Iranian destinations are still allowed through, but anything bound for Iran or leaving Iran is being stopped. Over 90% of Iran's trade and oil exports move through the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. That is $109.7 billion in annual trade, and it just got choked off. According to Iran International, this blockade is costing Iran an estimated $435 million a day in lost economic activity and $159 million a day in disrupted imports. Food, medicine, industrial goods, all of it cut. A naval blockade under international law is an act of war, and this is the single biggest escalation since American and Israeli strikes hit Iran on February 28th, 46 days ago. This didn't happen in a vacuum. It follows 21 hours of failed ceasefire talks in Islamabad, Pakistan, where Vice President J.D. Vance led the American delegation and Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf led the Iranian side. Those talks collapsed on April 12th. The very next day, Trump signed the blockade order. Iran's response was immediate and furious. Iranian armed forces called the blockade piracy. Their messaging boiled down to a single warning. The ports of the Persian Gulf are either for everyone or for no one. A senior IRGC advisor declared that the United States is doomed to fail and that Iran possesses significant untapped capabilities. That language is deliberately vague and deliberately threatening. The IRGC Navy, which operates separately from Iran's regular Navy, has fast attack boats scattered across the Persian Gulf. Trump addressed that directly, stating that any Iranian fast attack ships approaching U.S. vessels enforcing the blockade will be immediately eliminated. That's a shoot-on-sight order. On the streets of Tehran, thousands rallied against the blockade. Prices inside the country have already surged roughly 40% on some consumer goods since the war began, according to Fortune. The Iranian rial has dropped 8% against the dollar on the black market. An analyst named Brooks warned that without oil export cash, activity implodes, the currency goes into a devaluation spiral, and hyperinflation follows. Iran was still managing to export roughly 2 million barrels of oil per day before the full blockade took effect, according to tracking firm Kempler. That revenue stream is now directly in the crosshairs of the U.S. Navy. Ghalibaf, for his part, took a different approach. He posted a photograph of gas station prices near Washington, showing $4 a gallon, with the message urging Americans to enjoy the current pump figures while they last. That's not just bluster. It's aimed at the one pressure point Iran believes it can exploit: American consumers. And here's where it hits home. Oil prices surged the moment the blockade was announced. U.S. crude jumped about 8% to $104.24 a barrel. Brent crude climbed roughly 7% to $102.29. Earlier in the conflict, Brent had spiked above $119 a barrel. Gas prices in the United States have already climbed significantly since the war started on February 28th. The pain at the pump is real, and it's getting worse. Energy analysts have warned that prices will remain elevated well into the end of 2026, as long as this conflict continues. Trump moved to close the back door as well. He threatened any country helping Iran circumvent the blockade with a 50% tariff. That threat is aimed squarely at China, which has been one of Iran's biggest trade partners. China's foreign ministry fired back, calling the blockade against the world's common interests. But the enforcement question is still unclear. The blockade is described as impartial against vessels of all nations. Yet how the Navy actually handles a Chinese-flagged tanker heading for an Iranian port remains an open question. Boarding it is one thing, diverting it is another. Sinking it is something else entirely. That ambiguity is what makes this so dangerous. The Wall Street Journal has reported that Trump is considering resuming limited military strikes to break the diplomatic stalemate. The U.S. already bombed Karg Island on March 13th, targeting approximately 90 military sites. Karg Island handles about 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. If strikes resume against that facility, Iran's ability to export oil even after a blockade ends would be crippled for months. The Islamabad talks didn't fail over small disagreements. They failed over the one issue that neither side would bend on: nuclear weapons. Iran currently holds 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. That is enough fissile material for approximately 11 nuclear weapons. The United States demanded zero enrichment. Iran refused. 21 hours of negotiation. And that was the wall neither delegation could get past. Trump's public response was blunt. He said he doesn't care whether Iran returns to negotiations. Vance said the ball is in Iran's court. Neither statement suggests a second round of talks is coming anytime soon. And that matters, because the 2-week ceasefire that was agreed to in early April has exactly 7 days remaining. No second round of talks is scheduled. No back-channel communication has been reported. The clock is running down with nothing on the diplomatic calendar. So what happens in those 7 days? There are 3 realistic paths forward. The first path is military escalation. Iran challenges the blockade directly. The IRGC sends fast attack boats toward U.S. Navy vessels in the Persian Gulf. Under Trump's shoot-on-sight order, that engagement ends one way. And the moment a U.S. warship fires on an Iranian vessel, the ceasefire is dead. Full strikes resume. Karg Island gets hit again. Iran's remaining military infrastructure takes another round of punishment. This is the worst-case scenario, and the IRGC's own language about untapped capabilities suggests they haven't ruled it out. The second path is economic surrender. The blockade holds. $435 million a day bleeds out of Iran's economy. The rial collapses further. Hyperinflation spirals beyond 40% on consumer goods. Food shortages worsen. Iran's leadership, facing a domestic crisis it can't contain, comes back to the table with a new offer on nuclear enrichment. Not zero enrichment, but something closer to what the U.S. can accept. This is the outcome Washington is betting on. Squeeze hard enough, and the regime folds. The third path is the one nobody in Washington wants to talk about. Domestic pressure forces Trump's hand. Gas prices keep climbing. 60% of Americans, based on polling trends, oppose the war. Pope Leo XIV has condemned the conflict publicly. The political cost of holding the blockade starts outweighing the strategic benefit. Trump accepts a deal that falls short of zero enrichment, declares victory, and moves on. This path requires Iran to survive the next 7 days without doing anything rash, which is a bet on Iranian patience that history doesn't always support. 7 days. That's all that separates where we are right now from one of those 3 outcomes. The U.S. Navy is sitting off Iran's coast with orders to stop everything that moves toward Iranian ports. Iran's economy is hemorrhaging nearly $500 million every single day, and the only negotiation that could have prevented this already failed. The question that will define the next week, and possibly the rest of 2026, is straightforward. Does the blockade break Iran's will and force them back to the table? Or does Iran challenge it and collapse the ceasefire entirely? 7 days. The clock started this morning.